KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
Welcome back to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. And you must remember this.
Play it once, Sam. For all time's sake.
I don't know what you mean, Miss Elsa.
Play it, Sam. Play as time goes by.
Oh, I can't remember it, Miss Elsa. I'm a little rusty on it.
I'll hum it for you.
Even if you've never seen Casablanca, pieces of it must be embedded in everyone's pop culture DNA, because certain images, lines of dialogue, and pieces of music seem at least vaguely familiar to everyone.
You must remember this. A kiss is just a kiss. A sigh is just a sigh.
In November of 1942, Warner Brothers invited audiences into Rick's Cafe. There we met its jaded American expatriate owner, Rick Blaine, played by Humphrey Bogart, the beautiful and enigmatic Ilsa Lund, played by Ingrid Bergman, the heroic Victor Laszlo, played by Paul Henreid, the loyal piano player, Sam, played by Dooley Wilson, and of course, the charmingly corrupt French captain, Louis Renault, played by Claude Rains.
Find Mr. Laszlo's luggage and put it on the plane.
Yes, sir. If you don't mind, you fill in the names. That'll make it even more official.
You think of everything, don't you?
And the names are Mr. and Mrs. Victor Laszlo.
But why my name, Richard?
Because you're getting on that plane.
I don't understand. What about you?
I'm staying here with him till the plane gets safely away.
No, Richard, no. What has happened to you? Last night
Last night we said a great many things. You said I was to do the thinking for both of us. Well, I've done a lot of it since then. It all adds up to one thing. You're getting on that plane with Victor where you belong.
But, Richard, no one.
Now, you've got to listen to me. You have any idea what you'd have to look forward to if you stayed here? 9 chances out of 10, we'd both wind up at a concentration camp. Isn't that true, Louis?
I'm afraid Major Strasser would insist.
You're saying this only to make me go.
I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
The iconic image of Bogart's cynical romantic in a trench coat and with a cigarette in hand inspired imitations ranging from Bugs Bunny to Woody Allen, who dedicated the play and film Play It Again, Sam to Bogey. Bogart's influence also jumped the Atlantic to get a tribute from French heartthrob Jean-Paul Belmondo in Breathless. And watching Casablanca today, you may be surprised to see how topical its themes about refugees trying to find safety or a sense of home play out against the backdrop of Trump's policies. But for the moment, let's travel back to 1942 and to the first trailer for Casablanca. That trailer opened with gunshots as titles wiped across the screen that promised, if you're looking for adventure, you'll find it in Casablanca.
Casablanca, city of hope and despair, located in French Morocco in North Africa. The meeting place of adventurers, fugitives, criminals, refugees lured into this danger-swept oasis by the hope of escape to the Americas. But they're all trapped, for there is no escape. Against this fascinating background is woven the story of an imperishable love and the enthralling saga of 6 desperate people, each in Casablanca to keep an appointment with destiny.
I know a good deal more about you than you suspect. I know, for instance, that you're in love with a woman. It's perhaps a strange circumstance that we both should love the same woman.
What do you want for Sam?
Don't buy and sell human beings.
That's too bad. That's Casablanca's leading commodity.
You can ask any price you want, but you must give me those letters.
That's all.
Richard, I tried to reason with you. I tried it. Now I want those letters.
Humphrey Bogart, the most dangerous man in the world's most dangerous city. Ingrid Bergman fighting the strange fascination that draws her closer and closer to him. Casablanca, where every burning moment brings a new danger, where every kiss may be the last. Okay, they don't write copy like that anymore. But some would argue that they don't make pictures like Casablanca anymore. This year marks the 75th anniversary of Casablanca, a film that would provide defining roles for its stars Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. So this podcast, I'll be paying tribute to the film. First, we'll hear from a trio of movie lovers at the TCM Film Festival, where Casablanca celebrated its 75th birthday with a screening to a very enthusiastic crowd. And then I interview Noah Eisenberg about his new book, We'll Always Have Casablanca, the life, legend, and afterlife of Hollywood's most beloved movie. I remember seeing the film as a little kid because my dad loved movies and passed that passion on to me. I bought the Richard J. Noble Film Classics Library book of Casablanca, where there were frame grabs of every scene along with the complete script. I remember poring over that book endlessly because that was before VHS, DVDs, or Blu-rays. You only got to see the film when it played in theaters or on TV, but not on demand whenever you had a craving for Bogey or Rick's Cafe. If I suddenly wanted to see Claude Rains as Captain Renault, the closest I could get would be to flip through that book and remember how deliciously he delivered his lines.
Hello, Rick.
Ollie?
How extravagant you are, throwing away women like that. Someday they may be scarce.
Over the decades, Casablanca has lost none of its appeal. So let's begin this podcast with some TCM folks paying tribute to Michael Curtiz's Casablanca.
Hi, my name's Charlie Tavish, and I'm the head of programming at Turner Classic Movies. And tonight we played Casablanca for the second time at the TCM Classic Film Festival in honor of its 75th anniversary. It's obviously one of the greatest classic movies of all time, and for good reason. It's unbelievably romantic, and what I really love are the politics, and I love the idealism behind it. It's stirring, and when I saw it first as a young boy, I think it inspired me in a lot of ways to think about the world and think about heroes and what heroes are and what makes someone a hero. And that was what's so great about Humphrey Bogart's character and about Laszlo, and the interplay between the three leads. It was beautiful. It's one of my favorite movies.
What do you think gives Casablanca its legacy, its long-lasting appeal across generations?
I think it's what I sort of just said, the idealism behind it. I think that you feel inspired when you watch it. The scene where they play the Marseillaise and the crowd stands up. It's so moving, and you get chills because it feels like it's good versus evil, and it feels like the good guys are fighting the good fight. And you want to be on the good team, and that's how you feel when you watch the movie. It's almost like it draws you in, and you have a rooting interest. In addition, the love story is really complex, and you don't know where it's going to go. And I think that's another thing too that makes it such a great film. The combination of the politics and the idealism with the love story.
One woman has hurt you, and you take your revenge on the rest of the world. You're a coward and weakling. No, Richard, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but you are our last hope. If you don't help us, Victor Laszlo will die in Casablanca.
What of it? I'm going to die in Casablanca. It's a good spot for it.
All right, my name is Danny Reed from Precode.com. It's a website about Precode Hollywood, 1930 to 1934. Casablanca is probably one of the films I've seen most in the theater. I've always loved it. It's a lot of people see it as like a really serious cinema classic, so it takes us forever to get around to it. But it's actually really funny. It's a lot of fun, but it has a very strong romantic undertone. The longing between Bogey and Bergman is just fantastic.
I tried to stay away. I thought I would never see you again. That you are out of my life. The day you left Paris, if you knew what I went through, if you knew how much I loved you, how much I still love you.
Is that the thing that stands out the most for you about it?
No, it's Claude Rains, but I was trying to give you, because I know everybody's going to say Claude Rains, because Claude Rains in that movie is, perfect. I mean, there's not a day that goes by where, not everybody on the internet's not quoting his...
Shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
You're winning, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Everybody out at once.
He's just like the perfect kind of comic relief because his character also has a really interesting arc where he goes from willing collaborator to freedom fighter by the end. Spoiler alert. But Claude Rains is the best part of the movie. But so it's like one of those movies where I don't think I could name a flaw in it. So
I just interviewed Noah Eisenberg, who's written a book about Casablanca, and this is the 75th anniversary of it. One of the things he pointed out is that a lot of people may not think of it as a refugee film, but in current political climate, maybe people would be looking at it this year in a different light. And how does that strike you?
I could see that. I mean, Conrad Veidt was in Cabinet of Caligari, and he's in the movie as the German villain. I know several of the other character actors are also refugees, and that's kind of what's so interesting about Hollywood in the 40s to me. It's just how like everybody started leaking in, especially from Germany. You know, when like Dietrich came, and then slowly like Billy Wilder and all the other stars and actors came over this way. They kind of helped make Hollywood what was so fantastic about it in the 40s, like this just giant melting pot of idealism aimed at America.
And what do you think has given Casablanca its lasting quality? Why is it one of those films that just continues to gain fans and audiences?
I think it's a mix between Bogart's performance, which is so like moody, but he seems like I think he had contributes a lot to like an American character, like especially like during that time where you're kind of reluctant to get involved in things, you're very much concerned with your own thing. By the end of the movie, he kind of sees that he's a big part of, even if he's a small cog, he has to do the right thing, and that's very much what I grew up with believing in. I think a lot of people grow up believing in that your duty as an American, you can be small-minded, but you have to realize there's a bigger picture and work towards it. And the romance, the music, and the design, like it's a gorgeous movie. Like Michael Curtiz just directs the hell out of it.
Hi, this is Kelly Pratt. I am better known as Irish Jayhawk66 on Twitter, if you go there, or my outspoken and freckled blog, which is kellypratt.com. As far as Casablanca goes, I gotta say one of the most significant memories for me that kind of stands out in my brain amongst the many would be this scene where Paul Henreid gets the orchestra roused up. Basically it's a battle of song against Nazis.
Play La Marseillaise. Play it.
And it is definitely one of the most moving moments that I think comes to pretty much everyone's mind when they think of that film.
And what do you think about Casablanca has made it so long-lasting?
I think it's a combination of just a really good story that seems timeless, and yet today I would say in many ways it feels even more timely. If you think of some of the political things that we're going through in this globally, but even when there aren't some of these issues going on politically, it's still a timeless story. You've got romance, you've got action, you've got intrigue, you've got a war going on, you got Nazis, you've got kind of this love triangle issue going on, and you've got incredible performances by incredible actors. And I think it's really a sense of authenticity because a lot of those actors that were starring in that film, including these small character roles, came as immigrants themselves, were some of them literally kicked out by Nazis and coming over to make that film. So it's pretty epic film.
Well, and even on screen too, you have refugee stories because Casablanca was a place where a lot of these people were waiting to transit from one country to another.
Exactly. Today, the issue of refugees is definitely very topical, very current, but I think that's also an issue that's never gone away. I mean, it has always been somewhere in the world that has been an issue, but the fact that a lot of those actors were themselves actual refugees really adds to the storyline. And again, the authenticity, it feels genuine and incredible performances by all of them. It's like we had the cream of the crop in literally every role. So whether they're playing the bartender or they're playing, the small role or the bigger roles that are memorable to all of us.
And do you have a favorite line?
Oh, golly, there are so many. Claude Rains' line when he says that he's shocked about gambling in that establishment. I mean, let's face it, he was given like a lot of the best lines because they were delivered so cheeky as they should have been. And so to be honest, I think he got the lion's share when it came to a lot of those very funny lines. And so.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks so much.
I spoke with Kelly Pratt, Danny Reed, and Charles Tabish in April at the TCM Film Festival. I spoke with Noah Eisenberg a month earlier in La Jolla when he was having a book signing for We'll Always Have Casablanca.
So Noah, we are here at Warwick's bookstore because you have a new book coming out about Casablanca. So the first time I got to speak to you, you had just written a book about Edgar G. Ulmer, who is a filmmaker who was kind of on the fringes of Hollywood. And now you're doing a book about a film which has come to symbolize kind of Hollywood itself. So what kind of a journey was that between these two books?
The Ulmer book, you're absolutely right. In fact, the very subtitle of it, A Filmmaker at the Margins, underscores that sort of peripheral fringe position that Ulmer occupied in Hollywood. And this move to do a book on Casablanca was not a conscious decision to do something that was much more of a touchstone, a Hollywood touchstone, or sort of the apogee of classical Hollywood cinema. But I did want to, after spending all of those years in the archives and researching especially the emigre community in Hollywood of the 1930s and 40s, that's really what forms the central kind of, it's a central chapter actually. It's called Such Much, and it's the central chapter of the book. And that's something that I felt that was in need of reappraisal, reevaluation, something that I felt had often been overlooked in the story of Casablanca. It was always the greatest love story, the greatest romance, the Bogey Bergman picture that it remains for so many people. And I'm not disputing that. That's a big part of it. But in addition to that, the story of all of these different emigres and exiles and immigrants who had made their way to Hollywood during the Hitler regime, they are so very important for this film. And so I wanted to give them their due. And that's a major focus, a major emphasis of this book as well as the Ulmer book. So that's that's the hidden affinity.
That's the bridge that gets you from one to the other. So when you were tackling this book, what can people expect when they get it? Is it exactly like a making of, or is it more kind of about the legacy of this film and how it's managed to last so long?
It's a combination of both. I mean, the making of, Algene Harmitz is a wonderful film historian and who'd done a book also on Wizard of Oz. In 1992, on the 50th anniversary of Casablanca, she published Round Up the Usual Suspects, which is a wonderful title. And that book, she leaves very, very few stones unturned in terms of the production history of the film. I cover some of that as well in the first chapters of this book, but big focus of this one as well is the afterlife and how the film continues to resonate 75 years after its premiere in New York City on Thanksgiving Day at the Hollywood Theater in Midtown Manhattan. And so that's something that I wanted to account for, why it is that we still think of it as such a touchstone of classical Hollywood cinema, why it is that this is the film that is shown anytime there's a celebration of Hollywood, why it is that it's constantly on TCM, for instance, and all of that, and why it is that the people riff on the lines and quote the lines even if they have never even seen the movie. So that's part of it. The place that it occupies in our cultural lexicon, so to speak. And so I wanted to zero in on that as well with this book.
Now, the fact that we are talking about this film 75 years after it came out would probably have been a bit of a surprise to some of the people making it before they started shooting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In fact, quite famously, both Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart were really uneasy about this film, and it was a difficult production for both of them for different reasons. I don't think either of them ever would have expected it to go on to become the movie that it was. And in fact, Bergman, this at least in the world of Hollywood cinema, this was sort of her calling card, and she, to the end of her life, really, in a way, almost regretted how much this film was left over many arguably better films that she made in her long career. Bogart, too, was really unsure whether or not he could pull it off as a romantic lead. He'd played so many, tough guys, gumshoes, and so forth at Warner's before this film, and he just didn't know whether he could do that. He had other personal matters that he was dealing with as well. His marriage was breaking up and so forth, and so this was definitely a tough film to make. The screenwriters, too, I mean, the Epstein twins, for instance, Julius and Philip Epstein, they thought of it as just work for hire. I mean, they were contract writers at Warner's, as was Howard Koch, and this was just one of many, many films that sort of passed through their hands. But they had no idea that it would go on to win, as it did in 1944, the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. It was a part of the slate of pictures from 1943, even though they rushed it into release and were able to do the premiere in New York City, again, on Thanksgiving Day 1942. But technically, it's a 43 film.
So in going through all this past details, all the history of it, and speaking to people about the film's legacy, what's your feeling about why it has managed to last so long? What kind of a chord is it striking with people that even contemporary audiences and young people and kids still kind of pick up on Bogart and some of the lines?
Well, those are different registers, I'd say. The contemporary chord that it strikes today, no doubt, and this is something I published just last Friday in the Daily Beast, a piece on the refugee problem, the refugee crisis then and now, and I think that is definitely a register in which the film currently resonates. The refugee story that's told on screen, much of it referenced, and then other scenes in the film implicit, but really the core of the story of the first the unproduced stage play Everybody Comes to Rick's, but then also the screenplay here is really about that story of languishing refugees in Europe and the terribly difficult predicament that they found themselves in around the time of the production of this film.
With the coming of the Second World War, many eyes in imprisoned Europe turned hopefully or desperately toward the freedom of the Americas. Lisbon became the great embarkation point, but not everybody could get to Lisbon directly, and so a tortuous roundabout refugee trail sprang up.
For the kids, I mean, I think that it's those quotable lines. I think that's something that still remains. I mean, again, I showed this film at the New School where I run the film program, and I show it to the students in undergraduate seminars. And most of them have never seen the film, but they know so many of the lines. I mean, in political discourse today, too, I mean, I'm shocked to find that there's, in the film, it's gambling, but that line is used, rarely is a week or two pass by when we don't have some reference to the film. Indirect, usually. I mean, just as a line. And so, yeah, its quotability and its iconic status. I mean, I think just the images from the film, including the one that graces the dust jacket of this new book of mine, they're so iconic. We know them, and we know because of the bogey cult in the 1950s, especially he passed away in 57, and the Brattle screenings in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard and Radcliffe students flocked to the movies during their exam period and watched the film and shouted out their lines almost as if, anticipating the Rocky Horror Picture Show. But that sort of cult following and cult attraction, I think, not merely to Bogart, but especially to Bogart from the 50s onward, I think is also something that college students, and people even younger, but certainly college students at that point in time, and I think, strangely enough, even today, to a much lesser extent, but even today, and every Valentine's Day, this movie is shown not only at the Brattle Theater in Cambridge, but the Dartmouth. I teach in the summers up at Dartmouth. The Dartmouth Film Society shows it with real regularity on Valentine's Day. And students ages 18 to 22, they pack the auditorium and watch this movie as a celebration of romance to some extent, bittersweet romance as it turns out. But I think also just a celebration of the film and of classical Hollywood. And so it remains, I think, the go-to film, not merely on Thanksgiving Day, which was the day that the book was released, as fate would have it, but also I think whenever people are really trying to evoke a certain moment that speaks to that era, that epoch of classical Hollywood, Casablanca is really first on that list. And Umberto Eco made this wonderful observation in a piece that he wrote in the early 1980s, that the Casablanca is not one movie. it is movies, and I think that that's true. I think that it's sort of, it is the stand-in for, and just because it kind of luxuriates in so many archetypes, and there's so much that's really not only depicted on screen but also percolating beneath the surface, and all. It's more than just a single movie in many respects. There's something strangely composite about it, or strangely, God, I don't even know how to put this, but it in a way, it depicts not only the story that they were attempting to tell on the sound stages in Burbank, California in the summer of 1942, but it is also commenting on earlier films. It's commenting, for instance, on Algiers, with Hedy Lamarr from a good 4 years earlier. It's commenting on a lot of the war pictures that Warner Brothers was making, including Confessions of an Anti-Nazi Spy from 1939. And it's anticipating, I think, also some of the films that would come after it. And I think that's what, it's that richness, that texture that also defines the film, and also I think accounts to a large extent for its enduring quality, its staying power.
And you also have things like Woody Allen's Play It Again, Sam, which probably brought Bogart to a new audience on a certain level, because that was in the 70s?
The stage play was already at the end of the 60s, enormously successful run on Broadway, more than a year if I'm not mistaken. And then by 72 you have the Harold Ross adaptation, screen adaptation.
They say that dames are simple. I never met one who didn't understand a slap in the mouth or a slug from a 45.
You never thought you could make it with dames? Well, you can.
Look, all you gotta do is make your move and you're home free. Tell her that you've met a lot of dames, but she is really something special.
Oh, that she won't believe.
Oh, no?
I have met a lot of dames, but you are really something special.
Really?
She bought it.
And yeah, I mean, that film is a direct, I was mentioning moments before this, that a bogey cult. I mean, there is no other testament, I think, to that kind of almost pathological devotion, almost monastic devotion to bogey, than the role that Woody Allen performs himself as Alan Felix. Not only quoting from Bogart, but Bogart there is almost his alter ego. There initially on the stage when it was doing its Broadway run, and then in the film you have. Lacey, I'm blanking on the first name of the actor who plays Bogart in this, but who's always present and sort of giving him advice on how to be that, embody that masculinity, how to deliver those clipped sort of declarative sentences a la Chandler, Hammett, James M. Cain, and so forth, and just how to comport himself, and Woody Allen, being the schlemiel that he is on screen and even off, is trying as best as he can to master it. I mean, that very famous scene at the end where he delivers the lines verbatim from the final scene of Casablanca.
And I understand, really.
Sure? You're not just saying that to make things easy?
No, I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong to Dick. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not on it with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
It's beautiful.
It's from Casablanca. I waited my whole life to say it.
He announces that he's been waiting his whole life to deliver that speech, and it says a lot. I mean, it was meant, of course, for it's in a comedic vein, but I think it's more than just that. It really does betray, I think, the obsession that not just Woody Allen, when writing this play in the final years of the 1960s, found himself facing, but also others, of his generation, and again these legions of students at Harvard, Radcliffe. But then also there was a study that was done in the 1970s of students up in Palo Alto at Stanford, and all these interviews that were conducted. And there too, it definitely had attained cult status. And I don't even think it was only limited to these elite institutions. I mean, I just think that in film societies across the country, Lou Lumenick, for instance, who recently retired from the New York Post as the film critic there, he was one of the dozens of people I had the pleasure of interviewing, and he mentioned that when he was a student at CUNY, that was one of, sort of a centerpiece of the work that he had done in the film society there. And Jim Hoberman, who for many years was the lead critic at the Village Voice and now writes a column for the Times, he told me how his mother, when she was at Brooklyn College, she watched it. So soon after, it was still in general release. So soon after it was released in around 1943, so during the war, when they got to that very, very famous Marseillaise scene, everybody in the theater, this is in one of the big picture palaces in Flatbush, the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, everybody stood up and sang the Marseillaise with it. So, I mean, just in terms of, again, the level of identification, the level of engagement, that's pretty extraordinary. And I sometimes joke about it, sort of anticipating Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's usually my reference. I would say almost this hasn't quite happened the same, but people quote lines from The Big Lebowski, I think, with a similar sense of cult, kind of cultish quality to it. But this is a film, I think, again, because of these quotable lines, because of the brilliant script that the Epstein twins, along with Howard Koch, and with some input from Casey Robinson, a few other contract writers at Warner's. It's that, this is the script also that is just taught so widely. It was taught by Sid Field when he was still alive, and it's also taught today in the McKay screenwriting seminars that are taught not only in the U.S. but abroad. And he always ends his screenwriting with a 4-hour spiel on Casablanca. And one of the reasons for it is that it is such an evocative and poignant screenplay, and I think a really great object lesson in how a screenplay can work when done, the way that these amazingly talented screenwriters managed to do in 1942.
We've been talking mostly about its legacy in the United States, but it traveled overseas quite well. We just showed Breathless here in San Diego, and the Jean-Paul Belmondo character is looking at pictures of Bogart and doing the little, the thumb over the lip. So it has international appeal.
Yeah, that scene in Breathless when Belmondo's standing in front of he's at a picture palace cinema in Paris, and it's The Harder They Fall. That's the poster that he's looking at, and he does his best to do that kind of bogey. He too is very much a part of that bogey cult that took root not only on these shores, but definitely in France. The reception in France was really quite ardent. There were those who thought that it wasn't the most accurate reflection, of course, of history, but then, it was played over and over again at these repertory houses, in particular in the Latin Quarter. And in Italy, I mentioned Umberto Eco and the very famous piece that he wrote. He was not only a great novelist and critic, but he was also a leading semiotician, as they called it, the study of signs. And he was working with a team of researchers at the University of Bologna when he wrote that piece. And I believe, again, it was around the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken. But there, too, major reception among Italians. In Germany and Austria, even though it was censored during the Adenauer period, right after the war, because they didn't want to rock the boat, so to speak. So about 24, 25 minutes of film were lopped off because you couldn't have these references to Nazis. They were in a period of what they called, ironically enough, denazification. And so when they showed it up until the 70s, it was in a highly truncated, censored version, dubbed. And then by the 1970s, when you had the kind of same sort of cinephilia that had already taken root in France around the Cahiers de Cinema crowd and so forth, in Germany and Austria began to be shown in the original, and people were just smitten with it. And I interview a number of critics and film historians, film preservationists, who speak to me about that. And then in Sweden, too, where you would think it would have taken off very, very quickly and early because of Bergman, among other reasons. But it was only really quite late that it, if we can even speak of it as having attained cult status. It was in the past decade or so, and just recently there's a wonderful documentary on Ingrid Bergman called Ingrid Bergman in Her Own Words by a Swedish filmmaker named Stig Björkman. And when that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2015, I interviewed a Swedish film critic named Mårten Blomqvist, and we spoke about the significance of that documentary. And he says that's really what again, just seeing the documentary on Bergman, it drew people back to the film. What he also commented on, which is so important, I think, was in terms of the larger context at that very moment, is Sweden, next to Germany, was the nation in Europe that took in the most refugees. And when watching the movie in 2015, he was interviewed for Swedish radio. Morten Blomqvist, the Swedish film critic, said suddenly he realized it's a refugee film. And he'd watched it over the years, but it was only in that summer when he was at Cannes, so in 2015, that suddenly he realized that. And it's very, very nice. He reviewed the book just last week in Dagens Nyheter, which is one of the two leading Swedish daily newspapers, and he spoke specifically about that aspect, about the refugee story. I was so heartened to note the book had also been reviewed in this. I lived as a teenager in Sweden, and it meant a great deal to me that it was being received. And that again is just in terms of your question, Beth. It's the very fact that it's being covered in Sweden shows that people are still interested, I think, in this film.
Now, it takes a long time to put a book together, but when you started the book, you weren't probably aware of what kind of politics would be going on right now in terms of refugees. So has it surprised you how contemporary some of those themes have suddenly come to be?
Yeah, when I said earlier on about this strange bridge between the Ulmer biography and this book, and that bridge is really about those refugees, exiles, emigres who landed in Hollywood in the 30s and 40s under the Hitler regime, and under fascism in Europe, more generally speaking, I knew that was going to play a big part in the book, and it does. It's that there are 7 chapters. The 4th is the central chapter. What I didn't realize, of course, is that when the book would be published, that we'd be in the kind of, and who could have anticipated this? And what is both, I think, heartening as well as haunting for me is how much the story now, resonates with the current kind of political regime, and I guess along similar lines, the reviews that I've been just incredibly happy with the book's reception so far, and the different people who've responded to it and what they've chosen to write on. But almost all of them, if they don't make it the sort of the central theme of their review, it's definitely next in line. But so many of them have looked at the film sort of refracted through the lens of this current political moment and the refugee crisis that we're facing once more, and the 7 nation, or now I guess the 6 nation ban, and so forth. And so I, of course, never could have imagined that would be the world into which the book would be, sort of thrown or cast. But that's what we're currently facing, and it's I guess, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how to respond to it, because on the one hand, I feel almost it's sort of tinged with guilt, perhaps misplaced guilt, I don't know, but guilt that the book that I wrote is now suddenly speaking to so many people in a moment that, I so very much wish we'd never be facing. So it's a strange position to be in, that the book, on the one hand, I should be grateful and thrilled that so many people want to talk about it and are writing about it because of this, the sort of the link to what we're all facing at this present moment. On the other hand, it's just such a depressing and these are very dark times that we're living through. And I think, again, that's an unintended affinity with the times that these people who are depicted on screen in a Hollywood film not only many of them had lived through, many of the actors had gone through and experienced what's portrayed on screen, but also behind the camera. Michael Curtiz had family that was stranded in Europe, and several of whom perished in the camps, as did S.C. Sakal, who plays Carl the waiter, Cuddles as he was known on these shores, and several others. And so, it's a Hollywood movie, and it's a fiction, and yet, strangely, it has a very, very firm anchor in the history that was unfolding at that moment.
Well, and also you have the character of Rick, who's this kind of American expatriate, but he represents a very kind of American attitude, and his attitude is very embracing of all these different people, because his cafe is kind of this refuge, this place where everybody can, of whatever background they are, can kind of escape to safely or be there safely.
Yeah, in the Warner's, in their press kit that they did, the publicity materials they prepared for the film, one of the things that they noted was that, so it was on stage 7, stage 8, but they said the stage 8, I think it was the specific place, they called it International House, because people were from some 35 different nationalities and all these different languages that were spoken on set. And in fact, German, it's really, again, the strange link to the Ulmer biography, but German was the lingua franca. That's what even these, Hungarian-born, whether it was Curtiz or Peter Lorre or S.C. Sakal, who plays Carl, the waiter, that German was the language they used. And yes, Rick is that. He is the American who, and also at a time, look, his chum, his best friend is the African American Dooley Wilson, Sam.
Boss, let's get out of here.
No, sir. I'm waiting for a lady.
Please, boss, let's go. Ain't nothing but trouble for you here.
Coming back. I know she's coming back.
We'll take the car and drive all night. We'll get drunk. We'll go fishing and stay away until she's gone.
Shut up and go home, will you?
No, sir. I'm staying right here.
He drinks with him, he travels with him, and sure, Sam looks at him and calls him boss and sir and so forth. But that scene when in the flashback when Ilsa and Rick and Sam toast to one another and drink champagne together, there's a review in one of the few black-owned newspapers in New York City, the Amsterdam News, that reviewed it, and the critic said this is one of the greatest roles that an African-American actor has ever played. And I learned later that when they would screen the film in Harlem in 1943, when it was still in general release, they would screen it through and they would play the different scenes with Dooley Wilson because it was such an enormous advance that there he was a full-blown character. And Rick, that too, not only does he have his dear friends who were all foreigners in Rick's Cafe, but his best friend is this African-American musician. And so the film could get away with that, especially since it's set in North Africa. But this was a time when, especially in the Jim Crow South, there were certain films that couldn't be shown, or they would edit out scenes because this was not a moment of integration. In addition to that, Rick, too, he does the right thing. He begins as this, with all those professions of being an isolationist. I stick my neck out for nobody. But, of course, that's precisely what he does. Whether he's helping the Bulgarian couple and Helmut Dantina, the Austrian-born actor who plays Jan Brandl, whether he's helping him, giving him a little advice that number 22 might not be a bad spot to put all of his chips, or whether he's helping, ultimately, Victor Laszlo and making sure that Ilsa gets on that plane with him. Laszlo's great lines. Welcome back to the fight. This time I know our side will win. Well, that's the conversion. That's the great political conversion of this. And Rick is a wonderful American archetype. I wish we could have more Rick today, but yeah.
Do you remember the first time you saw the film and what kind of an impact it had on you?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it was when I was living in Sweden, but it's unclear. I was in my teenage years, and my mother was huge, still is, she'll be here tonight, and she is a huge fan of the film. And initially, I was resistant. I thought that this is something that middle-aged women loved, and it was a very kind of pig-headed, teenage, rebellious response. How wrong I was, of course. And then it was really later when I was in college, and specifically in graduate school, when I was up at Berkeley, I watched it and found myself suddenly kind of, almost smitten with it. Just that, wow, what have I missed? And I think that there too, that was the beginning of this deeper immersion in the study of all of those European refugees and exiles, immigrants who were in Hollywood. And I think that there's a wonderful, very, very chatty, anecdotal history of Hollywood in the 1940s called City of Annette by Otto Friedrich. It's a lot of great anecdotes in there. And I was reading that around that time too. That and Anthony Halbut's Exiled in Paradise, which is another wonderful study of that period, specifically that niche. And that's, I think, around the time that I really learned to appreciate the film and saw it in an entirely new light. But no, initially, that's a sort of strange and funny irony of the book, is that initially my response to it, I think, was really, at best, lukewarm, if not just plain cold.
This is a film that's been around for a long time and has been written about and talked about a lot. When you were putting the book together, did you find anything that really surprised you, or that was something you hadn't heard about?
So there were a couple of, it's not, there's a fair amount of primary research in this book, but as you said, and as I said moments ago when I was praising the wonderful Augene Harmetz in her, Round Up the Usual Suspects from 1992, her production history, she left very, very few stones unturned. The part that I do bring to this for sure is, because of my ability, my linguistic facility, my ability to read primary materials in German, and then to some extent in Swedish, and some of the others, I was reading some in French as well. But in particular, the German, that is certainly new. And so there are two major discoveries that I thought, and they're otherwise they're pretty small, but they're major in the sense that first I mentioned the Amsterdam News. The nobody had ever talked about this the reception of the film in the then called black press. So that was entirely new, and I was so happy to be. I did some research up in Haarlem at the Schomburg Center and dug up a few things there, and the Elliot Carpenter papers as well. Elliot Carpenter is the guy. He was a studio musician. He'd played with Dooley Wilson already in the 1920s in a jazz band called the Red Devils. But he was the guy who was playing off screen. Dooley Wilson didn't know how to play piano, so it's Elliot Carpenter who's playing off screen. So I looked at his papers and also at the Amsterdam Press, got that. Then also working at the Leo Baeck Institute in the Center for Jewish History in Manhattan. Nobody had really looked at the reception in the emigre press, and there was German language called the Aufbau. The Reconstruction is what the direct translation of the title of that newspaper was, but it was German Jewish newspaper, and the review there is also incredibly revealing, insofar as it too talks about the experience that they had actually gone through, and that this film, miraculously enough, undertook to portray on screen. And they were very, I think, proud of that. Just as the Amsterdam News, that Haarlem-based black-owned newspaper, was very proud of the performance by Dooley Wilson. There are a few other things too that were for me at least new discoveries, but those are the two I always single out. I think because they were, I just think so very revealing and very illuminating when trying to look at the film from both of those different angles. So from the angle of Dooley Wilson and what this film might mean. He's not a Pullman porter. He's not a domestic. He's not a servant. And to see this kind of character, because I've always been drawn to him anyway. But I think to look at it in the context in which the film was made. Today, people may look at it and kind of scoff at, oh, he's always saying sir and boss and so forth. But this was huge. These were major strides. And I can say that because it's not just me who's saying it, but the Amsterdam News was saying it. And readers, African-American readers at that time were saying that. And then also with Aufbau, to see the way that the German Jewish emigre community was responding to the film was, for me, extremely important. And I think sheds quite a bit of light on that facet of the book.
You mentioned the writers being people who work within the Hollywood system and were kind of cranking out films that were given to them. And what does it say about the fact that this is such a product of kind of the Hollywood system, which was this kind of assembly line, but it's a film that really does strike so many chords? And do you think it's the fact that it was a product of this that has helped it, or is it a fluke of this system? I mean, how do you see that? Because, a lot of times we talk about the Hollywood studio system as in a semi-derogatory way, as like an assembly line. It's not like people had the creative freedom that they would get later when the studio system broke down. But how do you see that kind of playing a role in the film?
Yeah, I think it was the French critic André Bazin who first spoke of the genius of the system, and I think that there is something to that in this film for sure. I mean, it was Andrew Sarris who also spoke of it as the happiest of happy accidents, and this is the greatest exception to the auteur theory, because he didn't hold Michael Curtiz, the director, in such high regard compared to the other auteur directors he was really, was much more drawn to. So there definitely is that. But then there's also, and this is something that Ingrid Bergman said late in life, because, when she kept, people always wanted to ask her about Casablanca when she would travel the globe and, do sort of Q&As with audiences and so forth. She said that there's something almost mystical about this film. And I think when we were talking earlier about how at the time during its making, that she and Bogart and others were really skeptical about it. And same was true with the Epsteins, too. They said, we weren't making art, we were making, a living. And yet there's something, it's hard to put your finger on. What is it about it that had it transcend just that sort of assembly line product that was being churned out in Hollywood during the studio era. And I don't know what that is. There is something almost mystical. She said she says in the quote, and I begin with this, the epigraph of the book, is it filled a certain need that was there before the film, and I think there's a lot to that, and so, but it's a mix. I mean, I think it is. Yes, I don't disagree at all with what Andrew Sarris said about this happiest of happy accidents, because I think there was something that was, the great timing, the ability to take advantage of this enormous pool of highly talented and well-trained actors who were there and filling all these bit parts. There's just a massive supporting cast in that film is really, really impressive. And then, Hal Wallace, who at the time was trying to achieve a certain degree of independence at Warner's. He was doing these independent productions. He had done, these signature productions. He had done Voyager the previous year with this film too. It's a Hal B. Wallace production, and I think he had a great deal invested in this film. I mean, didn't command the highest of budgets, but I think he wanted to make sure that this was going to be a film that he would be proud of, and so you have that as well. And Curtiz, for even if he is the greatest exception of the auteur theory according to Sears, he was so very talented and also incredibly efficient. And that, look, efficiency was the name of the game in sort of the studio production of that time. And he was incredibly efficient. And he was, look, a lot of it was his credit so Bergman may have been very distraught during the making of this film because she didn't know whether she should be in love with Rick or with Victor. But Curtiz's response to that, "Don't worry, play it in between. Play it in between," he would say. And brilliant. I mean, having her play it in between, she really, that kind of very tense and uncertain, all the sort of bundle of nerves that she, and you see it when her cheeks start to tremble a bit. It's terrific, and he kind of coaxes that out of. And I think he coaxes an incredible. Bogart said famously later he didn't do anything differently in this picture than he'd done in all the others. He just had Ingrid Bergman, who looked at him with that sort of amorous gaze, and suddenly he was a romantic lead. There's something to that, but also he gives this incredible performance. The very response. You can perhaps remember this great scene when he enters after Bergman convinces Sam to play as time goes by, and he storms in. As time goes by.
Sam, I thought I told you never to play.
And he looks at her. He too. I mean, his cheeks are trembling there as well, and it's just so there's this kind of. These sort of unspoken gestures are really, really important in this film. And I think there are also a lot of unspoken gestures among the supporting players, these day players too. A lot of glances in the film, almost a throwback to the silent pictures. There's another great scene when you see Bogart's cheeks tremble, and that's when Joy Page, one of the 3 American-born actors who are among the 15 or so credited actors in the film. Joy Page was Jack Warner's stepdaughter, so nothing like a little Hollywood nepotism. But when she comes as Anina Brandl and asks him what for advice, what would you do?
We come from Bulgaria. Well, things are very bad there, monsieur. The devil has the people by the throat. So, Jan and I, we did not want our children to grow up in such a country.
And so you decided to go to America?
Yes. But we have not much money, and traveling is so expensive and difficult. It was much more than we thought to get here. And then Captain Renault sees us, and he is so kind. He wants to help us.
Yes, I'll bet.
He tells me he can give us an exit visa, but we have no money.
Does he know that?
Oh, yes.
And he's still willing to give you a visa?
Yes, monsieur.
And you want to know?
Will he keep his word?
He always has.
Oh. Monsieur, you are a man. If someone loved you very much, so that your happiness was the only thing that she wanted in the world, but she did a bad thing to make certain of it, could you forgive her?
Nobody ever loved me that much.
And he never knew. And the girl kept this bad thing locked in her heart. That would be all right, wouldn't it?
And Rick's response, nobody's ever loved me that much. No woman has ever loved me that much. His cheeks are trembling, and you can just, there's an intensity that I think is really quite extraordinary. And I think that Curtiz was also at least partly responsible for coaxing out of his actors this wonderful performances.
We're talking a little bit about how the film has kind of a political resonance today. But for people when the film came out in the early 40s, how was it received? Because Hollywood's not known for making
wildly controversial or political films. So was it taken as having a political message or having a political subtext?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was. And in fact, that was one of the things that all of the critics, regardless of, there were a few dissenting voices. I mean, since we're in San Diego, maybe I should mention that Manny Farber was one of those few. This is when he was writing for the New Republic, and he ran a piece that was called "The Warner Boys in Africa," I think was the title, and he felt that it was really Hollywood hokum. He thought that it was, one of the great epic phonies, as he called it, almost anticipating Holden Caulfield there, the great epic phonies of Hollywood. But he made a point of mentioning in particular, and this is something that he did, that James Agee, who was another dissenting voice, Pauline Kael, who thought of it as schlocky romanticism, as she put it, those are her words. One of the things that all of them, I think, could agree upon is the powerful Marseillaise scene and the significance of that political gesture, specifically in that scene. Other critics, and they were the real chorus of very, very positive voices, whether it was Bosley Crowther at the New York Times or whether it was a whole slew of other critics writing for the industry trades as well as for the dailies, they were enormously, I think, taken with this film. And one of the reasons they were taken with it, I think, was because of its political message. And look, Warner Brothers took heed for this. In September of 1941, Harry Warner, the president of the studio, had to go before Congress and testify before the very, very active and vocal isolationist faction in Congress. They were accused of warmongering. They were accused of really beating those drums of war in films like, Confessions of a Nazi Spy from 1939. Even the Paul Muni, the Émile Zola biopic, The Life of Émile Zola, that too was thought of as being they were called premature anti-fascists. That was the real accusation, and so they took heed over it. But this is a film where it really, really paid off.
And one last question is: do you have a favorite line or scene from the film?
Oh God, that is a good question. The one, I mean, you probably won't be surprised to hear this from me, but the one scene that I just so love, and it maybe also will come not so much as a surprise to you, that this is Rainer Werner Fassbinder's favorite scene in the movie as well, is the scene of Herr and Frau Leuchtag, the elderly couple, as they're preparing for their journey to America, and when Carl sits down and drinks a cognac with them, brandy with them.
The first class.
At last the days came.
Well, Reichstag and I are speaking nothing but English now.
So we should feel at home when we get to America.
A very nice idea.
To America.
To America.
To America.
Liebchen, sweetness hat. What watch?
10 watch.
Such much?
You will get along beautifully in America.
And of course, I love that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking some time to talk to me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Beth.
That was Noah Eisenberg, author of We'll Always Have Casablanca, the life, legend, and afterlife of Hollywood's most beloved movie. Thanks for listening to another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I hope this has inspired you to go watch Casablanca again, or for the first time. So, till our next film fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum of payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.